Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
At my retirement party, my son raised his glass and said, "Now you can finally stop pretending you were ever important." He didn't slur it. He didn't laugh after. He said it plain as day, like he was reading the weather report. The whole backyard went quiet, just forks clinking plates and a dog barking somewhere in the distance. I didn't flinch. I didn't say a word. I took a sip from my beer, handed him the envelope I'd been carrying in my back pocket for about 3 months, and said, "You'll want to open that alone." You ever see one of those family videos where everything's going great, balloons, barbecue, cousins catching up, and then someone just absolutely detonates the mood? That was Jason. Always has been. The man could ruin a wedding with a handshake. We'd set up the party just like Emily wanted. Backyard string lights, Costco sheet cake that said, "Happy Retirement, Tom," in bright blue icing, and chairs set up in a circle like it was a damn group therapy session. Everyone we knew was there, coworkers, old friends, neighbors we'd been politely tolerating for 30 years. And then Jason, my golden boy, stood up and decided it was time to turn the whole thing into a Greek tragedy. I saw it coming too. He had that tight smirk on his face, the one he gets when he thinks he's being clever, but he's actually just being an ass. He raised his glass, tapped a spoon against it like we were at a wedding, and said, "Let's raise a glass to my dad, finally retiring from pretending to be someone important." People laughed, at first, nervously. The kind of chuckle you make when you're not sure if it's a joke or not. Then he added, "Seriously, Dad. 35 years of dressing up in a suit to go push paper and act like you were saving the world. Maybe now you can tell us what you actually did, if anything." The silence that followed was a heavy one. My wife looked like she'd swallowed a nail. Natalie, Jason's wife, mouthed something like, "What the hell?" and tried to reach for his arm, but he shook her off. Jason just stood there, dead serious, eyes locked on me. And I just smiled. Not big, not smug. Just a little half smile, the kind you give when you know you're holding a full house and everyone else is bluffing. I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a plain white envelope, no name, no return address, nothing but a thin little bulge inside, and handed it to him. "Open it later," I said. "Not here." He looked at it like I'd just handed him a dead mouse. Then, like always, he rolled his eyes and stuffed it in his coat pocket. Didn't even say thank you. Just walked off to pour himself another drink. The party tried to recover after that. People made small talk again, someone turned the music up a little, and the neighbors kid knocked over the bean bag toss. But it hung in the air, what Jason said. It had weight. I could see it in people's faces. Some of them probably thought he was right. Hell, maybe even I did once. I'd spent so many years not being able to talk about what I did, not even to Emily. You get used to people assuming you're just another cog in the government machine. Push paper, shuffle memos, fade into the background. But I never really faded. Not completely. 2 days later, I was in my condo, making my usual awful cup of instant coffee, when I heard pounding at the door. Like, "Open up or I'll kick it in" kind of pounding. I shuffled over in my slippers, cracked the door, and there he was, Jason, looking like he hadn't slept since the party, holding the envelope in one hand like it had burned him. "You sick bastard," he said, and his voice cracked halfway through. "How could you keep that from me?" And right then, before I could say a word, he started screaming. When Jason finally opened the envelope, he was alone in his overpriced home office, half lit by the dusty desk lamp he never replaced, with a whiskey glass sweating beside his laptop and a pit growing in his stomach. The moment didn't feel dramatic. There was no thunderclap, no sudden gust of wind through the window, just a soft rip of the paper and a weight he couldn't explain settling into his chest as he pulled out what was inside. No letter, no explanation, no sarcastic, "Gotcha," nothing personal at all. Just a single photograph and a yellow sticky note with 3 words, "Ask Marty." "Dad." Jason turned the photo over in his hands, slowly, like it might detonate if he wasn't careful. It was old, maybe late 80s or early 90s, grainy and faded, like something found in a shoebox after a funeral. It showed his father, younger, leaner, in full uniform, standing stiff-backed in front of what looked like a massive aircraft. But the aircraft, if you could even call it that, was blacked out, like someone had purposely scrubbed the image. The shape was hard to define, almost too smooth, like it had been sketched from memory instead of photographed. Jason stared at it for a long time before focusing on his father's face, which looked nothing like the man who just took a roast beef sandwich home from a retirement party he didn't want. He looked up, Marty, first, assuming it was Marty Lasker, Dad's former coworker, who always smelled like cigar smoke and cheap aftershave at the family barbecues. Found his number in under 3 minutes, because Marty was one of those guys who still kept a landline and had a Facebook profile that looked like it had been set up for him by his granddaughter. Jason didn't waste time with pleasantries. He called. It rang twice before a raspy voice answered with a suspicious, yeah. The second Jason introduced himself, Marty went dead quiet. Then came a click. Line dead. No explanation. Just gone. That was the moment Jason realized something was very, very off. He tried calling back. 3 more times. Voicemail every time, the same robotic message, no name, just please leave your message after the tone. Jason left one message, it's about my father. I need answers. Please. But he didn't expect a call back and he didn't get one. Instead, he started digging. At first it was just Google-level stuff. Tom Gallagher, government contractor, defense logistics, boring acronyms like OFP and DARPA adjunct liaison. But none of it explained the aircraft, or why Marty hung up, or what his dad meant by Ask Marty. Eventually, Jason stumbled into old message boards and archived articles that mentioned a project called Blackbird's Ghost, allegedly a follow-up to the State Route 71 program. Something buried so deep in government bureaucracy that it was practically folklore. The only thing consistent across the pages was that it was never supposed to have gotten past the prototype stage, and that it had been officially scrapped sometime in the mid-90s after a personnel issue. Jason leaned back in his chair, staring at a scanned newspaper article that mentioned a confidential disciplinary hearing involving a Tom G., no full last name, and a halted aerospace initiative. His father had never mentioned anything even close to this. He used to say things like, I push paper, kid, or I work on supply chain estimates, the kind of vague stuff that made it sound like he was the guy ordering printer ink for the Pentagon. But this was not printer ink. This was something else entirely. Then, buried beneath the newspaper and the photo and his rapidly unraveling sanity, Jason noticed that the envelope had a crease it shouldn't have. He picked it back up, ran his finger along the seam, and felt something stuck between the inner layers. He carefully peeled the lining back, and sure enough, another photograph fell into his lap. This one hit like a brick. It was him. Jason, maybe 5 years old, standing in front of a wire fence with barbed coils at the top. Behind him was a giant satellite dish and what looked like a warehouse-painted military gray. He was holding a small toy plane and smiling at someone off camera. But Jason had no memory of this. None. He flipped the photo over and saw handwriting he didn't recognize. July 1991. Phase 12. Clearance confirmed. Jason stared at it for several minutes, long enough for the ice in his glass to fully melt and soak into his father's original photograph. None of it made sense. In 1991, he should have been in kindergarten in Arlington, not on some desert base in God knows where. His parents never even let him fly until he was a teenager. He pulled up a calendar calculator and tried to do the math. His dad started working in the field in 1989 and retired in 2024, which made... Wait, 38 years? That couldn't be right. 1989 to 2024 was only 35. He double-checked it 3 times, then wrote it down. 35. Not 38. What the hell kind of job has phantom years? Jason sat there in the half-darkness, staring at the 2 photographs, and a single question started repeating in his head like a drumbeat. Where the hell had his father taken him? The knock came harder the second time, and I didn't bother asking who it was because I already knew. My son doesn't show up unannounced unless he's ready to spit venom or demand answers. and judging by the sound of flesh hitting wood with enough force to rattle the hinges, this was going to be one of those times. I opened the door and there he was, eyes bloodshot, face flushed, holding the second photo in his hand like it was radioactive, like maybe just having it close to his body would poison him. He didn't ask to come in. He didn't say hello. He just walked past me, straight into my living room, and spun around like a prosecutor in a courtroom drama. "You took me somewhere," he said, voice already on edge, "somewhere I don't remember. Somewhere you shouldn't have been able to take me." His hand shook slightly as he held up the photo. I was 5. "What the hell is this, Dad? What the hell is base 12? I didn't answer right away. I went to the kitchen and poured 2 glasses of the good whiskey I keep for the rare moments that demand it, the one Emily doesn't know about, hidden behind the dusty old box of oatmeal no one eats. I brought the glasses over, set them on the table between us, and motioned for him to sit. He didn't, of course. He stood there like he was afraid sitting would make him complicit in something. "You think I was never important," I said, slowly, carefully. "You've spent your whole life convinced I was just a suit, a guy who took government paychecks and filled out forms no one ever read. But Jason, you have no idea who raised you." He rolled his eyes at that, same as always, and scoffed like I'd just started spinning conspiracy theories about aliens and lizard people. "Then enlighten me, Dad," he said, nearly shouting. "Because right now, you look like a man who dragged his kid to a top-secret facility and never told anyone." "I didn't drag you anywhere," I said, leaning forward with both palms on the table. "You were signed in. Just not by me." That shut him up, at least for a second. Then the anger boiled back up, louder, more unhinged. "What does that even mean? Who signed me in? Who took a 5-year-old to a locked-down military base in the middle of nowhere?" I could feel it building in him, this storm of rage and confusion that had probably been bubbling for years. Not just about the photo, but about me, about everything I'd never said, never shared. He was raised in a house with secrets stacked in the walls like insulation, and now he was finally realizing just how many of them had been left to rot in silence. "I worked on classified systems," I told him, still calm. "Not weapons. Not directly. Guidance systems, stealth navigation, countermeasure algorithms. Stuff that doesn't get movies made about it, but stuff that wins wars before they start. My clearance was high enough to get a look at things most people don't even know exist." "Then why the hell lie to us?" he snapped, cutting me off. "Why the garbage about supply chain estimates and logistics coordination? You couldn't even tell your own wife." That's when Emily came out of the hallway, barefoot, in her robe, with that look on her face like she'd walked into the middle of a live grenade. She must have been listening from the bedroom. She always had a talent for that. "I knew," she said, quietly. "Not all of it. But I knew something wasn't right. I just thought." She trailed off and looked at me, eyes glassy but not yet spilling. "I thought maybe it was another woman. Not this." Jason looked between us, his mouth working like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the words. He was doing the math again, the mental math he never got right. "You retired after 38 years, but you started in '89 and retired in 2024, he said. "That's 35 years, Dad. So where the hell are the missing 3? I just looked at him, and for the first time, I think he saw it, the weight behind my eyes, the things I'd buried under decades of silence, the pieces of myself I'd shaved off to make space for the secrets I had to carry. "There were projects," I said, slowly, "that didn't go through HR. That didn't technically exist. They didn't count toward my time officially, but I was there. I was in. I was part of something that scared even the people funding it." Jason dropped into the chair across from me, his anger finally giving way to something worse: confusion, disbelief, that hollow feeling that comes when you realize your entire framework of understanding is about to collapse. "You want to know who signed you in?" I asked, my voice steady. "I've been trying to figure that out myself. But I know one thing: it wasn't me. And whoever it was, they had clearance higher than mine." He didn't say anything after that. He just sat there, breathing heavy, staring at the photo of his younger self behind military fencing, and I could see the cracks forming in everything he thought he knew. I reached for my glass, took a long sip, and leaned back into the silence. I wasn't ready to tell him everything. Not yet. But I could see it in his face. He'd never see me the same way again. And that, at least, was a start. Jason didn't sleep for 3 straight nights after that conversation, and I wasn't surprised. Not really, because once the foundation of your childhood starts to crack, it's impossible to just go back to brushing your teeth and paying your mortgage like nothing happened. I knew he'd start digging, and I knew where it would lead him if he pushed hard enough. The thing he didn't understand yet was that some answers don't give you peace, they just raise better-aimed questions. What I didn't expect was how quickly he found it. Project Revenant, a name I hadn't heard in almost 15 years, buried in a forgotten PDF uploaded to a defunct university server by some intern who didn't realize what he was posting. Jason called me at midnight, his voice manic, rattling off acronyms like a man unraveling. There was a stealth drone program spun off from the DARPA GhostNet contracts in the early 2000s, he said, and you were in the contractor rotation. That's why you vanished for 9 months in 2010, right? I didn't answer him. Not because I didn't want to, but because I couldn't. I could feel Emily's eyes on me from across the room, her silence louder than his accusations. He kept talking, voice speeding up like a car with the brakes cut, telling me about a man named Lewis Hartman, an engineer who supposedly worked side by side with me during the final months of Revenant before he retired suddenly, and then went completely off-grid. No forwarding address. No retirement announcement. No death certificate. Just gone. And all of it happened in the exact year I left my post, for health reasons, before returning to a lower-level role. He asked again, "Is that what happened to you, Dad? Did they force you out because of something to do with Hartman?" I told him to get some sleep. I told him not everything on the internet was true. He hung up. What Jason didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that Hartman's disappearance nearly cost me everything. It wasn't just that he vanished. It was how he vanished and what he might have taken with him. Revenant wasn't supposed to fly. Not really. It was a proof of concept, a ghost wrapped in carbon skin, something that could be seen on radar 1 second and then disappear the next without ever actually being gone. It wasn't a weapon. It was a warning to everyone else playing in the shadows. We were first. We were always first. Jason was losing himself chasing that truth, and I could feel it in the way he talked, in the way he started skipping work and obsessing over grainy documents, in how Natalie finally showed up at my condo one afternoon without him, tears in her eyes, hands wringing the strap of her purse like it was a lifeline. She told me he wasn't sleeping, that he was drinking more than usual, that he'd started talking to himself in the office and not realizing she was even in the room. He just keeps saying he have to figure out what's real, she whispered. Like maybe nothing in his life ever was. I poured her a glass of water and sat with her at the kitchen table, watching her struggle to hold herself together for a man who didn't even know he was unraveling. I felt something break open in me, quietly, like a splinter working its way out of my chest after years buried under the skin. I never wanted to raise a clone of me, I told her, eyes fixed on the wood grain in the table. I wanted to raise someone better. But I guess some legacies are too loud to outrun. She didn't say anything for a long time. Just nodded, wiped her face, and left. 2 days later, Jason showed up again, this time not with anger or questions, but a manila envelope he held like it was radioactive. I got this in the mail, he said. No return address, but it was postmarked from Arlington. Inside was a court summons. The Department of Defense wanted to speak with him as a material witness in an investigation tied to a potential decades-old classified leak. I tried to play dumb at first, asked him if he was sure it wasn't a scam or some kind of phishing thing. But he just shook his head and pulled out the document. My name was right there in black ink, Thomas Gallagher. Under investigation. I'm the key witness, Jason said, almost dazed. They're saying you passed something to someone back in '09, and that whatever it was, it's resurfaced. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because if that file was what I feared, if it was the thing Lewis Hartman had taken with him when he vanished, then the government wasn't just digging up old bones. They were preparing for something worse. Jason stared at me for a long time, then set the envelope on the table and left. That night, I opened the bottle of scotch I'd been saving for when I died. I didn't drink it. I just sat there staring at the court document and wondering who had finally decided it was time to light the match. The last time Jason came over, there was no shouting, no accusations thrown like knives, no anger storming through the door ahead of him, just this thick, heavy silence that filled the room like smoke. He looked older than he had just a week before, like the burden of knowing too much was beginning to drag behind him, every secret a cinder block chained to his ankle. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched tight, and he held the court summons in one hand like it had started to burn his skin the longer he touched it. I didn't offer him whiskey this time. I just sat on the balcony, looking out at the water, sipping my morning coffee as if everything around us wasn't about to change forever. He stood there for a long time without saying a word, then finally muttered, "You dragged me into this on purpose, didn't you?" His voice was low, broken in the way that happens when someone's just past the point of rage and starting to taste despair. I didn't respond right away. I wanted him to say it out loud, to admit the thing I'd been preparing him to realize since the night of that toast, the night he publicly ripped my name apart with a smile and a champagne glass. All of it, he said, stepping closer. The envelope, the photo, the sticky note. Ask Marty. That wasn't a clue. It was bait. And there it was. The truth hanging in the air like fog before a storm. I nodded slowly, letting the silence between us stretch so that the weight of it would settle. I needed to know what you'd do, I said, finally turning to look at him. I needed to see how far you'd go to bury me, because if you were willing to wreck me over your own insecurities, I had to know before someone else offered you something bigger. His face twisted in confusion, the kind that comes when your entire perception of a situation collapses all at once. He looked like he wanted to laugh, scream, cry, anything to reject the reality I was laying out like cold steel between us. "You think I was trying to destroy you?" he asked, his voice cracking now, the fire giving way to fatigue. "I was trying to understand you. You never let me see you. You never gave me a damn thing." I raised an eyebrow and leaned back in my chair. "You were never trying to understand me," I said, voice even. "You were trying to replace me. Or worse, erase me. And you almost pulled it off." That stopped him cold. Because deep down, Jason had always resented being second. He hated living in the shadow of a man whose job title sounded boring on paper, but whose life had always smelled like secrets. And now that he'd built his own company, climbed the corporate ladder, and given all his energy to an industry I once shaped with signatures no one was allowed to see, the irony was starting to show. "You work for Ridgeland Solutions, right?" I asked casually, sipping from my mug. "They're owned by Caldrax Holdings." "You know that, yeah?" He blinked. Didn't answer. Didn't have to. I kept going. "Caldrax is a shell. A soft face for harder money. I signed off on contracts in the early 2000s, classified tech decommissioned by '09, that Caldrax has been siphoning funds from for nearly a decade now. They use those fake asset trails to cook numbers, launder old defense cash, inflate insider share prices. You remember that IPO spike your firm rode 3 years ago? That was blood money from a ghost drone that never flew." He looked stunned, like he'd been shot, but didn't know where the bullet entered. "And you gave them access," I continued, standing now. "Unwittingly, maybe. But access all the same. You were the final piece. The respected executive son of a long-serving government man. No one questioned the connections. Hell, they probably thought I set it up on purpose." His lips moved like he wanted to deny it, but the color had already drained from his face. I walked over to my desk, pulled out a hard drive, and handed it to him. "That's a full record. Names. Transfers. Dates. Enough to clear my name and burn yours to the ground. I already sent copies to 2 investigators and 1 reporter who doesn't scare easily. I held off until now." He looked at the drive like it was a bomb with a short fuse. "You're framing me?" he whispered. "I'm revealing you," I corrected. "There's a difference." For a second, I thought he might throw it, or scream, or tackle me right there in my own living room. But instead, he just slumped down into the nearest chair like the floor had given out beneath him. "You always said I was weak," he muttered. "That I wasn't built for your world." I shook my head, finishing my coffee. "I never said that. I just didn't want you in it." It eats people, Jason. It rewires your brain, makes you think loyalty is just leverage and silence is a weapon. I lived in that world too long, and I never wanted it to touch you. But you chased it anyway. And now it's going to chew you up. He left without another word. A week passed. Then another. The story broke wide. Jason's name was everywhere. Subpoenas, interviews, press conference questions his PR team couldn't spin fast enough. Ridgeland Solutions collapsed under the weight of half a dozen fraud charges. I was cleared of everything. Clean. Smiling. Quietly vindicated. Retirement got boring, so I found a new project. That morning, I stepped onto my condo balcony with fresh coffee in hand. The sun was rising, and the world felt calm for once, like it had exhaled. I flipped through my mail and stopped at one unmarked envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just my name, written in tight, mechanical lettering. I opened it. Inside was a single slip of paper. It read, "We need to talk. They know you're alive." I stood there for a long time, staring out over the water, the breeze catching the note in my fingers, and I smiled, not the smile of a man at peace, but the smile of a man who knows the game never really ends. Fade to black.